The Ocean of Drowsy Tides. Elorin Brightlea woke in the pale hour when the tower and the world share the same breath, and the room around him held the slow shine of a candle that never tired, a kindly gift from the candle maker whose shop smelled of bees and linen and steady work. And Elorin lay still for a handful of heartbeats, letting the memory of that shop drift through him the way a warm current drifts through seagrass. For the old artisan had taught him that a good light does not hurry the air, and that a wish can sleep inside a flame until someone opens a window within their listening. He rolled onto his side and pressed his palm to the stone near his pillow and felt the tower answer with a friendly coolness, then sat up with the ease he had learned from the field of endless pillows, and he dressed without clatter, smoothing his robe so the cloth would not feel startled. And he stepped to the window where the river braided a long strip of moonlight and the orchard made its soft counting of leaves. The candle that never consumed its body stood upon the sill as if it had always lived there, and in its quiet heart the smallest glow gathered itself like a creature preparing to speak. And when Elorin breathed a good morning, the light seemed to breathe in reply, and a thought that had been hovering at the edge of his sleep came close and took shape, an image of water widening to a horizon, of swells rising and falling with a patience older than maps, and of a tiny sail that leaned into that slow measure as a dancer leans into music. He whispered to Master Aldrin that he would walk along the river path and read the water a while, and the old wizard nodded from the doorway with the pleased quiet of someone who recognizes a lesson before its words have been chosen. And he said only to take the rhythm the candle had taught and to offer it to whatever waited beyond the bend. Elorin crossed the yard and let his fingers trail along the bowls that catch starlight for the garden, and he greeted the thyme and the fern, and the gate accepted his hand with its new willingness, and the path yielded the sound of his step as if it had been softened by a sweep of cloud. The cat with silver paws appeared from nowhere in the way cats love, placing one foot upon a fence post and one upon the air and then settling on his shoulder for a yard or two, and she blinked her approval and slid away to attend to some nightly accounting only she could keep. The river widened and gathered scent and hush, and the sky unrolled above it as if taking out a cloth too large for any table. And at the place where the path met the shingle, Elorin found not a boat tied to a post nor a ferry waiting, but a small skiff pulled just far enough onto the stones that even a child could nudge it free, its oars tucked like sleeping limbs, and the wood wore the soft gleam of care. He placed his palm upon the little hull and asked it if it would like a drift. And the boat answered by remembering how water felt, so he pushed until the river took it, and then he climbed in with the care one uses when entering a room where a baby sleeps. And he set the oars lightly and let the current claim the first measure, and in that gentleness the skiff turned toward a stretch of water he had not seen before, a reach that seemed to open out from the river as a page opens from a book, and the land fell away as if bowing, and the night drew a path of pale silver for him to follow without thought of steering. He did not travel fast. He did not travel far at first. He let the boat find the slow conversation of water with itself, a rise and a fall that were not opposites but partners. And each time a swell lifted the little craft, he felt his chest lift with it. And each time the swell settled, he felt his breath settle too. And the motion taught him accounting that was neither clever nor strict, only true. The banks dwindled, and where trees had stood there stood now only a low line of darker dark. And beyond that line the water spread its long shoulders and became the sea, wide and round and breathing, the whole surface moving as if the planet itself were drowsing and would wake only when the sun asked very gently. Elorin kept the oars feathered upon the surface so that they would not argue with the swells, and the skiff slid like a thought finding its correct word, and the air took on the taste of salt and moon and faint kelp, and somewhere far a bell marked distance without urgency, and gulls, already asleep upon some rock, muttered in their dreams. He reached into his satchel and found the traveler's light the candle maker had placed in his hands, the little cup that sang so softly it could be mistaken for silence. And he set it between his feet and watched the flames stand without hunger, its small brightness a promise to the dark rather than a challenge. And the sea seemed to like that posture, for the swells steadied as if to listen. The first hour at sea felt like a remembered lullaby. The second felt like breathing with another being. The third became the hour when thought loosens and curiosity stays. And in that hour he spoke to the water as one speaks to a friendly elder, asking nothing pointed and telling nothing heavy, simply sharing the small truths that rise when the world is large and kind. He spoke of the tower that listened and the harp that hummed beneath his floor and the river that slowed time and the bridge that let voices cross without grief and the owl whose feathers carried dust from the edges of dreams. And as he spoke, the sea gave him back the shape of each memory, not as a picture to keep but as a rhythm to wear. A low bank of cloud drifted in from the left and set its hem upon the water and made a softer roof for the night. And the skiff moved through a brightness like milk poured into tea, and the oars creaked with the manners of old wood. Elorin laid them down and let the boat ride free, and soon the sea itself began to sing. Not a melody from a mouth, but a round hum from everywhere at once. The kind of sound that happens when many small motions agree. And he realized he was hearing the ocean's breath, the long in and the long out. And he matched it with his own so that his ribs knew what the tide knows. He closed his eyes and felt swells lift his bones and set them, lift and set. And in that gentle repetition some small worry inside him grew bored and wandered off to sleep. And another worry, one about whether he would be ready for whatever the tower asked next, turned over and put its face in its paws and sighed and forgot itself. He opened his eyes and found the sea showing him pictures the way a candle flame sometimes does. Not sharp pictures, but suggestions formed by moon upon ripple, a hand placing a cup upon a table, a window being latched without a click, a broom turning in a corner so dust would gather itself rather than fly. And he understood that great waters do not only carry ships, they carry the ways of good living and set them in a pattern all can learn. A line of luminous creatures slid near the boat with the still pride of lantern bearers. A chain of small jelly forms that lit their bells faintly as they moved, and whenever the skiff dipped among them, the sea wrote cursive lines in light behind the stern, sentences made of glow that said nothing in words and yet said everything Elorin most wanted to hear. The cat with silver paws would have chased the lights if she had come, he thought, and the thought warmed him though the night was already kind. A slow hoot from far above told him that another friend of the dark kept company at a height, and he raised his hand, and the owl, wherever it was, seemed to approve. Hours or minutes that felt like hours melted past in smooth sheets. Somewhere a ridge of broken water raised small shoulders and laid them down again, and each rise said here and each set said now, and the boat had no argument with either. When Elorin grew drowsy, he set the oars into their pockets and tied the traveler's light to the thwart with the quiet knot the candle maker had taught, a knot that binds and unbinds with equal grace. And he lay back and watched clouds pull a shawl across the scattered stars, and the sea held him the way a porch hammock holds an afternoon, and he drifted into a shallow sleep where no edge was sharp and every sound wore a sweater. In that dozing he dreamed that each swell was a chest rising, and that the whole world was a sleeping creature whose comfort was his responsibility. And he smiled because the task felt sweet rather than large. And when he woke, the smile was still there, a small light that did not mind being uninspected. The skiff had turned a little and was now aligned with a procession of long, low waves that moved like enormous cats stretching, and as they passed beneath, the boat rose from belly to belly as a child crosses pillows on a friendly floor. And Elorin laughed once for the joy of the comparison, and the sea answered with a softer lift as if it too enjoyed the image. He sat up and placed his palm upon the surface and felt cool energy like a sleeping heartbeat. And the water under his hand became clear for a moment and showed him sand far below mottled like a quilt, and then the pattern blurred again. A shape rose to his left, not startling, a slow back with a small fin that breathed once and wrote a silver circle and went on. And he greeted it, and it greeted him by proving no splash is necessary to be seen, and he felt instructed again in the language of gentleness. When the moon began to tilt down, the sea shifted its color to something like pewter rubbed with pearl, and a bank of fog appeared as the softest cliff, and the skiff slipped into it, and the world drew closer without becoming small, and the oars made a muffled, pleasing sound that suggested wool against wood. And Elorin found that inside fog the sea sang the same song but at a lower register, and he matched his breath to that pitch and felt new muscles in his back relax as if they had at last been given their correct chair. A bell sounded again, nearer this time, and the note slid through the fog like a spoon through cooled custard. And the traveler's light answered by standing a touch taller, and for a little while the boat and the bell and the boy breathed in a common measure. When the fog thinned, the horizon had rearranged itself, and there ahead lay a ribbon of pale sand, and beyond it a low island of low grass and scattered stones and small pools that held the sky. And the sea lifted the skiff and set it down upon the sand with the kind mercy of a friend placing a sleeping child upon a bed. And Elorin stepped out and felt the ground beneath his bare feet cool and fine and grainy, and the air smelled of shells warmed earlier and of herbs that creep close to salt. He drew the boat up far enough to rest and let the traveler's light sit upon the thwart. And he walked along the water line where each wave came and dressed the shore in lace and then undressed it with equal patience. And he felt the teaching arrive in a sentence he could keep forever, that the largest forces he could imagine still moved by yielding and returning, that the sea renewed itself by giving itself away over and over, and that rest is not the opposite of strength but its rhythm. In that listening the island began to speak in its own soft paragraphs. A pool blinked with stars caught in its round eyelid and then opened to show a little shrimp testing the world with very delicate whiskers and then closed again to become mirror. A strip of seaweed folded itself into a ribbon, then unfurled, then folded again until it learned a new curve and kept it. A pebble rolled once and decided that was enough moving for today. The sun, still hiding beyond the lid of the world, painted the fog bank with a color like the inside of a shell, and Elorin felt the wish to sleep rise in him as if blown by a friendly mouth, and he allowed the wish to settle. And he slept for a while on the sand with his hand for a pillow and his feet for a bell. And the sea stood guard with the even attention of a nurse who knows how to let a patient rest. When he woke, the world had brightened by the smallest amount, and the tide had moved up to kiss his ankles. And the traveler's light still burned beside the skiff, untroubled, casting no shadow worth mentioning, and he felt as refreshed as one does after a nap in which the bed and the room and the window and the air have agreed on kindness. He returned to the boat and pushed into the water and climbed in and thanked the sand for giving him up without sulk. And he set the oars and let the slow shore current carry him along the island's body so that he could see its pools and grasses from another angle. And he noticed that every pool held the same sky differently, and every patch of grass moved to the same breeze with its own grammar. The swell beyond the island welcomed the skiff back with a deeper tone and lifted him in a longer slow, and he matched it again and again until the thought of matching was no longer a thought but a belonging. And when he glanced into the cup candle, he saw a picture rise in the flame, a stair made of water upon which a boy could walk if he set his feet to the measure. And when he blinked, the picture became only brightness, and he kept the measure anyway. The journey home began without a beginning, for a turn upon the sea is only a different continuation. And the sky grew paler, and the fog thinned, and the bell became only a memory that still served. And the gulls woke and flung their remarks and then forgot them. And the cat with silver paws appeared in his mind, lounging upon a coil of rope and laughing silently because she always knows where boys have been. Elorin played a tune upon the thwart with his fingers, a tune of 4 notes and then a rest and then 4 notes again. And the sea tucked the tune into its sleep and made it part of the long story waters tell to one another when there are no ships to hear. When the river mouth received him again, it did so as a parent receives a child who has been to the garden, with pleasure and no alarm, and it smoothed the boat's wake and let the skiff slide past stones and reeds as if it wore soft shoes. And dragonflies wrote their quick calligraphy beside him, and the bank offered its damp scent of mud that knows secrets and keeps them. He beached the boat where he had found it and lifted it with 2 hands until the bow kissed dry shingle, and he tied it with the knot that unknots easily. And he bowed to the water as he always did, because gratitude teaches more than any book. And he walked the path back to Wistmere, humming the sea's breath, so that his feet would remember, and so that the day to come would inherit the calm that the night had taught. The tower felt warm at the hinge as he touched it, and the stair felt steadier under his heel. And in the study the candle that never consumes its cup stood where he had left it, and rose to greet the traveler's light like two old friends meeting at a window. And he poured water into a bowl for the room to sip, and folded the blanket across his narrow bed so that sleep would find no wrinkle to complain about. And he lay down facing the stone and listened to the last of the tide breathing within his ribs, and he murmured a promise aloud for the sake of his own ears, that he would treat large tasks as the sea treats shores, approaching and withdrawing and approaching again, polishing instead of pounding, patient and returning. And in that promise the whole house grew quieter, and the river made a round sound against a root, and the boy drifted into that soft realm where all gentle journeys meet and trade stories, and the ocean laid a hand the size of a horizon upon his thoughts and tucked them in, and he slept with a serenity that felt like a long, slow tide filling a bay at evening, until every cove and every stone and every curve of sand had been touched with equal care, and the world around him breathed in the same key.